Okay then, so now we've created our template and it's all looking nice in the browser. Now we can start to add the functionality to this. So I want to start with this form at the bottom to add a new to-do. So when we type something in here and then press enter, it doesn't reload the page. Instead, it adds that to-do to the list. So to do this, we first of all need to get a reference to this form field right here. So inside the HTML, we can see this form has a class of add. So we'll get a reference to this form first of all. So inside app.js, let's create a new constant called add form and set it equal to document.query selector. And we want the .add class. So that gets us the reference to the form. Now we need to attach an event listener, a submit event listener to this form. So we'll say add form, .add event listener, and then we're listening for the submit event. So when that happens, we take the event as a parameter into the callback function. Now in here, the first thing I'm going to do is prevent the default action, and that stops the page from reloading. So I'll say e.prevent default, and then underneath what we need to do is get what the user types into here. So we can do that by saying const to do is equal to the form, which is add form, and then we want dot the name of the form field, which is add. So we can say form dot add to get that field. Then we want the value from that. So we can get this value, and what we're going to do is just log it to the console for a second. So I'm going to console.log the to-do. Save it and come over here. I'm going to press F12 to open up my console. And if we type something in here now, like buy milk, then we're going to see that logged to the console. However, what if we type in a load of spaces before and after it? Then when we get the value, we get all those spaces as well. Now, this could be an accident. We don't really want to store it with all these spaces inside the list. So we want to be able to trim these spaces off before and after. Now, we can use a method in JavaScript to easily do that. The way we do it is by using .trim on a string. So this is a string. This gets us the string of characters a user types in, and then we're using the trim method on that string. And what that does is remove any white space, any kind of spaces before or after the string itself. So now, if I save this and test it, if I had a load of spaces, then the actual text, now we can see we don't get those spaces, we just get the text itself because we've trimmed those spaces off. Okay, so now we have this to do. That is what we ultimately want to add to the DOM, to the page. We want to add it as a list item. So what I'm going to do is create a function which is going to generate some little HTML template and add that to the browser, add it to the list. Now the reason I'm creating a separate function and not writing it directly in here is because it makes our code more reusable. For example, if you were to extend this app in the future so that there were other ways to add to-dos, when you want to do that, you could just invoke this function. Okay, so it's reusable. You don't have to work this way, but I just want to show you a few ways we can work. So anyway, let's create this function. I'm going to say const, and we'll call this function generate template, because it's going to generate a template for the to-do, an li tag, and then it's going to inject that into the DOM. So we'll set that equal to a function, and inside this function, we want to do something. Now, what we're ultimately going to be doing is passing in this to-do. In fact, we'll call the function here. We'll say we want to generate a template, and we want to pass in the to-do right here that a user has typed in. So we're going to pass in that text, we're going to receive it here, and since there's just one parameter, we can now delete those parentheses if we want to. And inside here, what we need to do is generate a template, an HTML template, and output this inside it. So then, to create this template, I'm going to use a template string. Now, we could create elements using JavaScript methods like create element, but I think when you have to inject some kind of complex template, a few lines of code, it's much easier to actually write a template string. So I'll do that by saying const HTML is equal to a template string. Now inside here, what do we want the template to be? Well, it's going to be one of these things, one of these li tags right here. So all we really need to do is copy this dude and paste it inside here. I'm just going to fix this up a little bit and scoot those in like that. And then all we really need to do is replace this thing with the to-do right here. So we can do that inside a template string. We can output the variable inside these curly braces like so, and we want the to-do. So that there is our template, and now we want to take this and inject it into the UL inside this thing right here. So first of all, we need a reference to that UL. So we'll store that in a constant called list and set it equal to documents.query selector, and then we want the .todos. That was the class of the UL right here. It has a class of to-dos. So let me now come down here and say we can get that list, and we can say .inner HTML is now plus equals. We don't use equals because that completely overwrites the current HTML. We don't want to do that. We just want to add a new bit of HTML. We want to append to it. So we use plus equals, and we take the HTML, oops, not uppercase, this thing right here that we just created. So it takes this template string and it adds it to the HTML of the list. So we have this list and it has some inner HTML, which is all this. All we're doing is adding to that at the bottom with a new li tag and the stuff in between. So if we now save this, what we're doing is listing for the submit event, getting the value a user types in and trimming it. Then we're calling this generate template function, and inside we're creating this template with the li tag and the span and then this trash icon. Inside the span we're outputting that to do, which a user types in. And then what we're doing is adding that HTML template to the list in a HTML. So if we save this now and preview, then we can see buy milk, press enter, and it appears right here. So that's awesome. Now, this is great, but there's two things I still want to do. First of all, if I don't add anything and I press enter, that still adds something to the list. Now, I don't want that to happen. I want to check that a user has actually typed a value in and the to-do has some kind of length, even if it's just 1. So the first thing we'll do is a check down here. So I'm going to say if at this point, and then get the to-do, which is what the user has typed in, and I want to check if that has length. So I can say if to-do.length. Now, if this is a positive integer, it's going to evaluate to true. So if the length is 1, 2, 3, 4, then that's going to be fine. It's going to evaluate to true, and then inside we can call this function. That's if it does have length. Now remember, if .length returns 0, if a user has typed nothing in here and we press enter, the length of that string is 0. 0 is a false value, so we get false here, and we won't call the generate template function. So let's try this. Now if we try to add something like this, which does have length, it works. If we try to add something that doesn't have length, then it doesn't work. We're not adding that anymore because we're checking that it has length first before we try to add it. If I just do spaces, it still won't work because we're trimming it first of all, so it gets rid of all those spaces and then it has 0 length. So that's the first problem sorted. The second problem is this. If I type something in and press enter, then this stays here. Now I'd like it to clear the form. There is a very simple way we can do that. Underneath the generate template function, what we're going to do is just get the add form. Remember, that's this thing that we get a reference to, and this thing we add the event listener to. We get that form and we use a method on it called reset. So we can use this method on forms that we query on the DOM, and what that does is reset all the input fields inside that form. So if I save it now and try this, buy some milk, press enter, and now it works, and still we can't add empty to-dos. So there we go, my friends. That's the first step done. We have successfully now hooked up this part of the application so we can add new to-dos. The next thing I'd like to do is be able to delete to-dos when we click on these icons, and we'll do that in the next lecture.